Okay, thanks very much for moving in. Oh, that's better as well. So, yeah, I think Nick and I are going to talk about some of the things that John outlined, and a bit generally about kind of what it's like working in the realms of, I guess, sort of left field music, experimental music, in these kind of slightly odd, very odd times, sort of for the politics around culture and also the funding. Just to give a bit of background in case people aren't aware of the Quietus, it's an online music culture, general culture magazine that John Doran and I set up 11 years ago now. We came last year and did a talk about the 10 years of it. And it started out, it's kind of mirrored a lot of things that have happened in kind of online culture and so on. And it was started out as a very well-funded kind of music magazine. And then we launched the website. And a week later, in the summer of 2008, we got sacked. And cast out with this sort of shonkily built publication, but we took it over and have been running it independently ever since. And it's a real struggle. I think both John and I have probably damaged ourselves quite heavily with the stress of running it, because there's things like an online magazine is pretty much entirely funded by advertising revenue. About 2 or 3 years ago, Facebook and Google really started to ramp up the idea that it was only them who got you direct to your clients as businesses. So 90% of our ad revenue vanished within 6 months to Facebook and Google, which is why I've deleted my Facebook account. I think they're a pernicious company who are, having a terrible effect on politics and personal interrelations and solidarity between different groups, and they mean that I haven't got any money either. So why would I be on a platform that is, I think, destroying a lot of culture and society? And I don't mean that in a tinfoil hat way. I think it's true. And our brief at the Quietus, if you're not familiar with it, we don't have a sort of overall, this is the kind of music we cover. What there is Quietus music. It's a very specific thing, which is basically what John, myself, and the people who write for us, who are all really enthusiastic, passionate people, think is good. And that's kind of stood us in good stead, I think, because I think there's a lot of times publications can be led by like, we like things like Coldplay and things that sound a bit like Coldplay, and that's a dead end route to nowhere. So we've been going for 10 years. I suppose in some ways, like the Quietus is a bit like Lake Junction in that people can't. You say what is Lake? I went to Lake Junction gig recently. People say what is? Yeah, they were trying to do idents. What is Lake Junction? And somebody asked me, and I was like, I don't know. It's just brilliant. I really love the music that Lake Junctions plays, and it's run by a load of extremely knowledgeable, passionate presenters like Nick and others. And it's a great public service, which is what the BBC were doing, which is why. I wrote an article when the BBC announced it was cutting Lake Junction to one night a week. I wrote an article for The Guardian about it, and then there's been a big campaign you might have seen to sort of stop these cuts, because it's not just to Lake Junction, it's to jazz programming, it's to the global music, world music, for want of a better term, programming. Basically anything that young people or not white Daily Mail readers of the like from the Radio 3 output is being cut, which seems insane. If you look at the demographics of Radio 3's programming, the only shows that are listened to by younger people are Lake Junction, jazz programming, and the world global music programming. So there's been a bit of a campaign to sort of stop that, but I think that's, again, indicative of a time when you've got, on one hand, public broadcasting being squeezed by right-wing government agendas and austerity, and on the other hand, you've got commercial culture with no advertising, so there's a lot of hookups with brands, including brands like Lush. Quietus has worked with Lush on many occasions, and I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about how you work with brands without compromise, and what we've really valued about working for Lush. And I'm not saying this like I'm a prisoner of war of Saddam Hussein with a gun against my head. We really like working with Lush because there is no compromise. We can sit here and have a chat like this. We can, Lush have things like Black Country New Road on and do a huge amount of work in activism, and we find that exciting, and there's not a compromise. Other brands you see coming into music force people to do things that they probably don't really want, and it's all a bit queasy. So that's a bit about Quietus, just as a background. We've also got our third guest has arrived, because I think I told her the wrong time. Please welcome Nina Hervé from Rough Trade Books. Rough Trade Books, you might have seen doing some of the talks in the Barrel House in town. It's an amazing new imprint of the legendary record label, and I wanted to have Nina on board because she's, starting a new venture, doing something quite old school, like pamphlets in the modern age, and they're beautiful artifacts. The design of them is amazing. It's kind of a bonkers collection of writers and from all over the place. I've done one with a collaboration with a photographer. There was kind of just a real challenge to do. So I thought we'd have Nina here as well to talk about some of these challenges. But first of all, I wanted to say I probably asked both of you the same question. I was saying, people say, what's the Quietus? And I don't really know what it is. It's hard to explain. Nick, what would you say if Radio 3 said to you, what is if one of your own staff, it came up to interview, said, what is Lake Junction? What is Lake Junction?
Yeah, we didn't really know. We still haven't figured it out. But that's why when we had our Lake Junction festival, we, as you said, we went around with the microphone asking people what they thought it was, and we had all these different responses. Like, the home for experimental music was one. I'm trying to think of all the different versions, but I mean, for me, it's kind of like an unexpected selection of music. It kind of, I wouldn't say it was fully experimental. It's not really fully classical. But we definitely look at the margins. We look at the kind of, I guess, like outsider music is one area we're interested in. But then we can play a straight up Detroit techno record. We can play a harpsichord piece. So in a way, to me, this is what all radio should be like. It doesn't feel like it's that special. It just should be as free form and as open as that. So I've always struggled a little bit trying to think about this as a kind of specialist program. It just feels like that's how radio should be, right? That's if you go into a friend's house and you hear records, you're going to get a load of different things. You're not just going to get, deep house, probably.
And that's in a way like the Rough Trade pamphlets. It's not fiction. It's not poetry.
No, it's a bit of everything.
It's a bit of everything. Is that how you define a bit of everything?
Yeah, I mean, the tagline is printed matter for the counterculture. So it's kind of, that is pretty broad. But every time I ask somebody to do a pamphlet, I'm just like, just write whatever you want. Because I think that's where the best stuff comes out as well. If you set parameters, sometimes it's a little bit. And actually, with your one, maybe there was a bit of a parameter set because it was to do with the William Morris collaboration that we did. Yeah. So maybe yours was a little bit more difficult. I don't know.
And I don't like William Morris very much. Sorry, Will. Yeah.
So that was kind of that was a bit of an experiment, but it's all a bit of an experiment as well because, like you say, we've done short stories, we've done essays, we've done interviews, we've done photo essays. So, we range from a story about the British education system to a photo essay about Japanese love hotels. So it's a bit of everything, but it touches on the counterculture. So,
what was the thinking behind setting it up? 'Cause I don't know this myself necessarily.
Well, I worked at Rough Trade Shops for the last 10 years, and my role there was a bit of everything, really. It was great because it was so varied, so I never got bored, but it kind of made me think. Part of my job was doing some book buying for the shop, so we expanded and started doing more books, which we did really well on, and I kind of saw that there was something that wasn't being kind of there was a gap in the market, I think, and a lot of the book publishers that we dealt with just didn't really know what a rough trade customer wanted to buy, and then Faber Social started, so we developed a relationship with them, and we did loads of great stuff with them, but there was still the rough trade name really just kind of elevated what I was thinking, and so I just went to see Jeff and Jeanette at the label, and I knew that Roy had done that was the first rough trade book.
Amazing.
Basically.
Do it for your mum. The book about British sea power, but it's not really about British sea power, by Roy Wilkinson. Incredible. Yeah. One of my favourite ever music books.
So that was the beginning, and I thought, oh, okay. So Jeff and Jeanette are setting up a book publishing company. Maybe I should go and have a chat with them. And then that kind of lay dormant for about 5 years or so until I stuck my nose in and said, look, what's going on? And they kind of said, well, do you want to do it? So I was like, yeah. And so we were just kind of dancing around for about a year. And then I just thought, because we had no money. So the idea of doing pamphlets was a bit of a tester to see what a rough trade customer might want to buy. And they're short form, they are affordable, and we wanted to make them look really beautiful. They're kind of like, I guess pamphlets for me are kind of like the singles of the music world. So hopefully we'll start being able to do albums soon in the form of books. So it's kind of, it's just small steps at the moment.
And you've been enjoying it. Is it still
It's
fun?
a lot of hard work. I mean, I do everything from packing the orders and taking them down to the post office to editing and, you know, commissioning people to write stuff. And so, it's full on.
I've heard your house is rather full of boxes now.
Yes.
That you've become a
Yes.
depot and
it's
everything.
an office, a warehouse, and a living place. Well, not really much of a living place, is it, Will? Sorry. But, you know, we're enjoying it. It's good.
Great.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
When I'm not having a nervous breakdown. But, you know.
So that's very familiar. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's kind of possibly not really discussed with a lot of the kind of things on the fringes is that, you know, it's great fun. I'm not going to complain about my job. I've got an amazing job. It's a dream job.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a lot of pressures that are kind of quite stressful that you have to deal with that are quite different from any sort of when I've had jobs before, which are kind of more sensible jobs, I find it boring but not stressful. Now it's never boring, but it's insanely stressful.
Yeah.
It's the way it goes.
And it's kind of hard to cut off, you know, work from your normal life. I mean, work is my life now.
Yeah.
I can't cut off. I'm Nina from Rough Trade Books all of the time.
And so, Nick, when did you start at Leigh Junction? When was that?
It was about 9 years ago. So I was, I started off really gradually. So I kind of came in as a sort of did a week, like a guest week, I think it was. And then it just became more and more regular to the point now where there are 3 main presenters and I'm doing it every 3 weeks pretty much.
So it's interesting that it's all kind of Quietus was about a decade ago. You started working at rough trade shops and then Leigh Junction a decade. And I've noticed this in quite a few different organisations or things that were set up. Caught by the River, the amazing website devoted to sort of nature and music and drinking. That was set up about 10 years ago as well. It seems that there was this sort of something happened in a lot of different people's mindsets that maybe we were just sort of pissed off with the way everything was going, or that there was a way of. John and I think have always seen Quietus as slightly a reaction to the internet, even though we are a website. We've always treated it like a print magazine. It's just one where we've got more space. And we were definitely reacting against the whole idea of Web 2.0 and user-generated content, and there was very much the paradigm then. You know, there was no need for the critic anymore, and we felt there was. And now I think we're in this age of algorithms, so it's, you know, everything's defined by popularity contests, which are defined by AI bots, which are defined by culture void tech bros in California. It's horrible, really, isn't it? And I was wondering how you've seen the landscape change over the past decade, both of you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to work for iTunes, so I was a music editor before the iPhone came out, so we're going back quite a while. And I was working there for 4 years. I worked for the BBC as a radio producer. I did a bit, you know, DJing and things like that. And then I went into Apple, and it was a really interesting time because that was at the very beginning of this process of not really building playlists, but curating albums. So it's kind of still working with the traditional album as a format, but then the idea of labels not being so important, which I found quite hard to kind of deal with because I wanted to have the label quite often, unless it was a massive label, I wanted those small labels to be represented, but that wasn't really the way they wanted to take the project. And then, I kind of did that for 4 years, and the opportunity to go back to the BBC to present Leigh Junction and do more at the BBC came up, and I really felt that was, for me, I'd kind of done the tech thing, and it gave me a really interesting insight into that world. But yeah, that's all changed so much in that 10-year time. So now I actually still work for Apple as a kind of freelance with about another 60 people around the world, and we're basically checking the robots. So all those algorithms you talked about, we're just checking to see how good they are in terms of recommendations. And so it's quite interesting to see, you know, that whole process.
Are they good?
They're getting better.
Yeah.
They're definitely getting better, but we're being very honest with our grading. So, you know, some of the recommendations a few years ago were pretty bad, but now, I mean, it's definitely getting better. And it's a whole area we could talk about, but it feels like it's quite, you know, it goes straight down. It doesn't really spread across, you know. So it likes to keep people in sort of silos, I think. And I think Late Junction does the opposite of that. It's about trying to really take that and broaden it out massively. So I've kind of got this little conflict, going on, definitely. But it's, survival within, I really want to keep doing Late Junction, and sometimes you have to kind of find ways to kind of, afford to be able to do that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And Nina, you were working at a Rough Trade East in this. I mean, I've always, the vinyl revival, in inverted commas, I've often felt is a load of old cobblers. In some ways,
it's true.
broadsheets love to wheel out there. The vinyl revival's happening. It's incredible. And then I talk to people at record labels, in record shops, and in art and bands, and they say, no, this is complete nonsense. The vinyl revival. What was your?
I wouldn't say it's complete nonsense.
Not complete nonsense.
No,
is that too
I
far?
mean, when Rough Trade East first opened in 2007, I mean, for the first few years, it was really hard, and then all of a sudden, everyone just wanted vinyl, and they wanted physical objects. They wanted books. They wanted, So it was just kind of, it became a place where people could get that stuff, and it was the go-to place because it was, it's like the flagship store, if you will. But it's kind of, I think it was just a kind of anti technology, really. I think people love to have that physical thing. They want to see the artwork. They want to look at the lyrics. They want to, feel the objects. I mean, I've not got a Kindle. Until last year, I didn't download anything. I just always bought physical music or read books, or, I didn't interact with that kind of thing. I mean, maybe I was scared. I don't know. I just wanted the physical stuff to keep going. I don't know. But now I'm trying to work out what Spotify's all about. It's rubbish, aren't I?
It's like a permanent radio station. But did you find, there's often, I hear from people at small labels that, there's things like pressing plants get very clogged up by endless Rolling Stones reissues and things like that, and that's the big problem with.
Yeah, and record store day is kind of a problem for all of that, really. I mean, it's just daft. Why don't they just spread it out all across the year? Because the shops can't actually handle it, and the staff just go mental because they've got to work loads to, 20, before record store day and after record store day. It's just insane, and then that's it for the rest of the year. It's kind of like back to normal.
Yeah. Is the pamphlet world more
we don't have
bearable?
We don't have pamphlet day.
Yeah. I was interested about thinking about the idea of the broadening of culture, because it's very much like with the Quietus, we do an end of year list that a lot of the people take the piss out of it quite a lot. They think we're making up artists because it's stuff they've not heard of, and they go, these groups can't exist. But we spend quite a long time on it. John is really good at finding the bits from the kind of columns we run that were the best music from that. And it's all about kind of an enthusiasm for sharing music. We're not showing off like, we like all this obscure music. That's kind of just a refuge of the indie geek scoundrel, that sort of attitude. And it's all about communicating a sort of joy in music. And I suppose, is that the same sort of philosophy that you would have with the pamphlets with writing, and Nick, you'd have with what Late Junction does? Is that a shared thing among the Late Junction presenters, do you think, and production?
Yeah, so Late Junction isn't made by the BBC. It's broadcast by the BBC, but there's an independent production company called Reduced Listening that make it. And this is how the BBC work. It fluctuates between the BBC sometimes making programmes and sometimes independent. So at the moment, we've got this independent production company, and they're all from, they're huge music fans. They're kind of known within sort of, kind of labels and gigs, and they obviously know, you guys on Quietus. So it's kind of like it's a really different thing to working with the BBC, which is a very internalized, it tends to have its own things going on. And so it is, it's more than ever a collaboration between everybody from this production company and ourselves. So we're constantly sharing music and, and sharing links and just kind of, getting excited about it, talking about the gigs that we go to. So yeah, it's not just, when I do that program, it's not just me, it's, it's an input of lots of different ideas and different people.
So how does it work in terms of getting stuff like? 'Cause I think it can be often seem quite impenetrable, like how you get your music on Late Junction, how you become a writer for something like Rough Trade Books, or how you get on the Quietus or become a writer on the Quietus. We're actually very open to anything. You know, people send us stuff and we'll play it and or listen to it and review it. Or a lot of our best writers are people who've never written for anyone before, but they can't get in through the normal channels. So I was wondering for both of you, Anita, how have you found people? Have you had some sort of like totally random ones where it's just like this person's great even though they've not done anything?
Yeah, or I mean, maybe with the majority of them, I've kind of had some relationship with them before in the past through the shop or through friends or just hanging out. But it's kind of, I've purposely put on the website that I'm not open to submissions at the moment because it is just me, and I know. I mean, people just send stuff in and I can't read it, and I really hate not responding to people. So I don't want to be rude, but at the moment, the only way I can do it is by approaching people myself that I feel reflects rough trade in some way, or how I want the book publishing company to be. And it's kind of difficult, but then there's so much good stuff out there, and luckily people want to write for it as well. But and I think the deal is kind of appealing because it's 50-50 split after cost. So there's, it's completely transparent. There's no big publishing company just throwing a load of money at you and hoping for the best. And then, but also, I like to think that I'm giving each of the writers, other opportunities to make some money as well and to sell their. I mean, it was kind of like an incentive to push the authors to, sell their pamphlets too. But it harks back to the original Rough Trade Records deal, and that's the only way we can do it, to be honest, at the moment. So
that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And Nick, how does it work? The sort of the late junction process. I mean, is it mainly kind of presenter led? You're saying you all share links and things like that, but do you get feedback from other bits of the BBC suggesting things, or is it kind of quite self-contained in that way?
Yeah, I'd say Late Junction is really self-contained. We don't really get much feedback from any other presenters or programs. I think individually all of us are being just hit up all the time, and now that can be not just emails, but people send me music on Twitter or Facebook or any social media things, and it's just a constant stream of music coming in, and then I think the trick is to try and not miss the really good bits, which is really hard, and actually getting impossible to kind of. I think, again, like I look at your end of year list and it's like, oh man, missed all this stuff. Look at the Wires listing and it's just the same. You're thinking, how did we miss that? And then, it's a constant kind of catch up. But then there are other things that come in immediately where it all works. It could be like Boomcat, send a mail out and you go, amazing, this is great. I didn't know about this coming. It's already out, But the good thing about Late Junction is I don't feel the pressure of impact dates and all that kind of stuff. Like the bigger music industry is concerned about playing the record at the right time. I think we can be a bit late on stuff. It doesn't really matter. A lot of music we play is 400 years old anyway, so it's totally fine.
I think it's a good thing though to do that as well. Just stagger it, not bombard people all at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, otherwise it gets lost, and it's what's the point in doing that? And we're supposed to be probably playing music that other people aren't. Maybe a recent thing that didn't get the biggest kind of impact the first time around, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or something that. Yeah, the people have missed, whatever. So we don't have those kind of pressures, definitely. Yeah, which is a good thing.
How do you think, there is so much, I think it's a bizarre thing now that there's, it's impossible to make money out of making music, and writing was very difficult to. Yet there's more writing and music around than ever. It's this sort of like the absolute deluge. I mean, Quietus probably get 300-400 emails a day about stuff. There's just so much music out there. How do you think you can sort of aid discovery, or even getting Late Junction out to people, or getting Rough Trade pamphlets out to people? How do you break through the sort of fog of stuff?
I kind of don't, do I? I don't know. Let me have a think of that. You can carry on, Nick.
What you don't do is you don't cut the program to once a week. That doesn't really help, because we need a little bit more time, not just 2 hours a week to try and do all the music, to try and feature all the music that we're trying to feature. But hey, that's out of my hands. But no, it is hard, right? I mean, I mean, I just keep thinking about when, John Peel was, imagine him driving around with his cassette piles of demos and just kind of flinging cassettes in and just driving around and just constantly doing that. And these DJs have got piles of CDs, and I don't drive enough to be able to do that. That's not really how I do it. But yeah, I mean, I do spend hours and hours every day just going through stuff. That's the only way I can try and do it as a regular thing and constantly kind of taking notes of the things I think I want to play.
I was wondering what you think. BBC's publicly funded and has funded Late Junction, and now is cutting it, which is a counterintuitive decision. But you go to Europe, and I talk to musicians who tour in Europe, and over there you have lovely venues. They look after you very nicely. There's a high quality infrastructure. Music festivals in Europe are often they're able to be a lot more experimental because there's public money for doing that, and you actually see kind of a diverse crowd in terms of age groups and gender a lot of the time because there's that public funding push. In particular, we're doing a big. If any musicians out there, the Quietus is doing a project with the Polish Radio Institute, which was kind of like their radiophonic workshop to remix music from their archive, and there's a €2,000 prize for the winning entrance. And it's just, Poland's got its own political issues at the moment, really serious ones, and that's having an impact on their arts funding. But it often seems in Britain we don't really fund the arts properly in the way that Europe does. We sort of have an anti-art mentality, anti-cultural mentality within sort of the British idea of things, and I think possibly that's only getting worse. I was wondering what your views on that is.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of experienced that to a certain extent when we used to do various different pop-up shops in Paris all the time, and you have a certain budget, and with Rough Trade we're always trying to make the most of everything that we can possibly do, and this was when I was working in the shop. Shop and books are completely separate, by the way. Yeah, it was kind of incredible how much the French musicians were supported by the funding body, and they're paid to be musicians without having to, play gigs and stuff. It was kind of incredible talking to all of them, how they could just get by without worrying about paying the rent. And why can't that be like that over here? But culture is such a significant part of their whole thing, isn't it? In France, I mean, that's the only country I can talk about really, because that's the only one I've had experience with. I don't know what it's like in other countries in Europe, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. And actually, like Kate from This Is the Kit, they at that time I don't know if they're still living there, but they lived in Paris and they were living on a houseboat, and they were making a living being musicians without having to do a temp job or anything else, which is great. It's just freeing up your creative mind to just get on and do what you're wanting to do.
Nick, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work in Japan, so I'm out there quite a lot, working with a lot of Japanese artists. And the thing I get time and time again is how lucky we are here to, with the Arts Council funding projects, with the PRSF, with all these different kind of, organizations. But, so there's nothing. It seems to be 100% commercially driven. So if you work with a brand, then you can do something. Otherwise, forget it. But that's not the answer for sure, because I think there's so much more diversity. Obviously, there's so much more incredible things going on here that given a little push, given a little bit more money, could just, that just feels the right way to do it. So yeah, we're definitely lagging behind, and Norway's another place to kind of see that happen. Even Estonia, Tallinn's so much coming through because of funding. So we really need that more than ever. So the fact that it's being cut again is just such a regressive step at the time when people they need something, right? Everything else is kind of not in a great state. So we kind of need culture more than ever, and it needs the support, financial support.
I remember doing a panel with John Robb here in a festival in the Netherlands. We were talking about state funding versus corporate funding, and there was a certain Norwegian or Swedish musician who was saying he'd rather go and work in a shop than take any corporate funding for his work. And then John pointed out to him and said, "You get loads of funding from your government.
how many wars has your government been involved in? What's its policy on, it's all oil money in Scandinavia anyway. And he banged his head on the table, didn't he? You kind of snookered him a little bit. But I thought that was a really interesting, I thought it was a really interesting moment of it going, well, is the some brand stuff is quite queasy. Some of it's positive. What if, some brand came to Rough Trade Books and said, can we do some pamphlets with you?
If it was the right brand, then yeah, I'd definitely consider it. Like when we used to do stuff in Paris, it was sponsored by Agnes B, who was an independent fashion designer, hasn't got a big house supporting her. She's always stuck to her guns. She's never advertised. She started around the same time as Rough Trade, so it was a really great fit for us. And she plows loads of money into the arts and stuff. And so to have that support was great. But, before I left the shop, they had a partnership with a certain alcohol brand, Irish alcohol brand that I can't name. And that was a nightmare. They just wanted social media posts every 5 minutes. It's just like it just takes the soul away from everything, and it's just not worth doing in the end.
They don't realise that that kind of brand bombardment is just counterintuitive. It just makes you look like Wallies. On an old website I worked at, there was this thing called the Levi's One to Watch tour, and I don't think we even got any money for it. We just wanted to review a gig, and you had to put Levi registered trademark with then the S, then Ones to Watch, all one word and all in capitals, with a registered trademark and the TM and the R. And we would just say, this is rubbish, this is complete nonsense. And then there was another one, they did a Carling 24-hour gig, which was a 24-hour gig all around London. And John, actually, when before he stopped drinking, went on the thing and was just, all you could get was Carling for 24 hours. and wrote a very funny article about this, like saying that you've got wine in the fridge, let me have the wine. And it was, that kind of over-saturation of branding is it just never doesn't work. It's just idiocy, really. It's never going to achieve the stated aim. And the fact that none of those companies have gone on to do that says a lot. But then you've got someone like Red Bull, who were heavily invested in electronic music. And I think a lot of that kind of electronic music scene was sucking the teat of Red Bull, and suddenly, despite the fact, the electronic music scene can be sort of very self-consciously right on, and talking about in quite a pompous way. I think when Red Bull is run by a absolute right-wing arse, it was kind of the contradiction there, and then suddenly Red Bull pull all their funding, and now everyone's going what do you think about that?
Well, I agree, but at the same time, just the commitment to electronic music was quite high, wasn't it? And the studios were quite great spaces. So I'm just wondering who's going to step in and kind of provide that funding, because it's not going to be coming from any governments, right? So and it was a really international thing that I just thought worked really well. Yeah, even though the money was coming from a dodgy place, it's good art was being made from it. So again, it's a weird one, but yeah, who are going to be able to step in on that level?
There was William Morris Tobacco. We're going to set up a culture site a few years ago, which would have been charming. Do you think that something like radio, could end up? You could have the people have started. They've tried to do radio stations that have sponsorship, but they've often kind of been too brand focused, or whatever. Apart from the Red Bull Radio, could you see yourself sort of doing something like that in the future?
I mean, yes is the answer, because as long as there's no compromise on the music, then yeah, I'm completely fine with that, and I don't see why that would be a problem. I mean, we're not like, I think working at the BBC, you've got to be quite neutral with everything. So obviously, we can't get involved in anything politically. We can't even get involved in the campaign to save Leigh Junction. I mean, that's how neutral we have to be. So I would definitely welcome the opportunity to work with a brand if it was kind of, again, the right brand, and people who get it, and we could just keep going with the music. Because to me, it's the more important thing is to get that music out there to the people that want to hear it, or are curious, enough to want to hear it. So, kind of whatever it takes. Do you know what I mean? The BBC has been that place for so long, but kind of feels like they're just giving up on that, and they want to be the British Playlisting Corporation rather than British Broadcasting Corporation, or something. But they're obviously not that interested in original program particularly, or radio programs. I think it's just a fact, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be cutting stuff. And there are demands on them. They have, pressure politically, probably, budget-wise. Obviously, that's definitely a real thing. But this is cheap. It's cheap to make radio with just a pile of records and some person going on about it. It's not expensive stuff to do.
Yeah, exactly. We did a day of radio with Lush, which you could all search for. And it was great fun. We did I think it was 12 hours in Lush Studios, and we had like Laura Cannell coming on and playing. She's a recorder player, and she's very influenced by nature, and she was playing kind of very early music that was based around bird calls, and we had Chris Packham on discussing different bird songs, and we a Queer Bible did a very amusing show, and you could do a lot for very little, really, can't you? And it seems a shame people. But it's what's frustrating. Technology ought to enable people to be bold, and in some way, even Rough Trade Pamphlets is on. It's a physical product. You've kind of embraced technology and the kind of that I think the social media thing, and the way it's pushed out there is it's not like some fuddy-duddy press thing.
Yeah. I try.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it. I hate it, actually. But it has to be done. That's our main way of communicating with people. So, but yeah, I don't like it.
But do you feel that this is a time for kind of people doing bold and exciting things? And I guess there's a lot of people who want to keep doing that. And what keeps you going?
Just the belief that one day it will be financially sustainable, or some philanthropic investor will come along and won't want to interfere with the creative output. That would be great. I don't know. It's I guess there's just certain people that that drive is in them to keep on going until, I don't know, something might happen one day. You just live in hope, I guess. And you have to, if that's what you're into, if it's the arts that you're into, then you have to do your bit. You have to keep going. Otherwise, what happens? Nothing.
There'll be nothing. Nick, what about yourself? What keeps you?
Well, I know I'm always told this by the BBC that there are hundreds of people who want to do my job, so that keeps me going. I want to keep doing it. So I think that's always a bit of a threat they use when you ask for more money. But no, I think I'll be doing it anyway, in some form. I grew up in Plymouth, so I'm from Plymouth originally, and Jeff Barrett used to have this record shop, which I used to go to quite a lot, and he used to have records for me waiting. It was amazing. It's like, you're going to like this. And it was just, it started from there, being, 15 or 16 or something. And then it hasn't really stopped. So to the point where I haven't actually sold any of my records that I think I've ever bought. So I've got a bit of a problem with that. But no, it's just something I love doing, and I can't really imagine not doing it, So when the BBC thing kind of eventually falls apart, pessimistic side of me says, then I'll find another way to do it, and it won't be about trying to make any money. No one works in radio to get money anyway. It's not why you do it.
Yeah, with the BBC thing, though, we did this campaign to kind of keep Radio 3 funding things like Late Junction. If you are a fan of Late Junction or any of the other programmings, do email the BBC. Making a stink is apparently what the people being sort of publicly critical of them is. It sends them into a apoplectic frenzy. So do that. I mean, with the group of us who've been writing articles and letters and coordinating petitions and stuff keep pestering them, and we've actually got a meeting with Alan Davey, who's is he the controller? Is that
he's the controller of Radio 3.
The big boss man, and you kind of get the impression his hands are slightly tied, but we're going to be sort of going to see him and talking about it further. So I mean, I don't know how much hope there is of it being saved, but if you do want to protest to the BBC, do email them or post. There was when they announced the blog, they used a blog that was slightly hidden away, and I found it to announce the cuts, and people were commenting on there. So do that. I think we've got time for maybe one or two questions if people have them before Aphex Twin is playing, according to the board outside, which is very, very exciting. But if anyone got a couple of questions at all, or maybe you just want to watch Aphex Twin. Anyone? Oh, yep.
I don't know, Will.
So talking about the kind of how things work when there's not much money around, I hope you pay Will a decent living wage for his for his contributions to Rough Trade Books?
No one gets paid. We both work in his dad's pub part-time. That's how we pay the rent.
And you have an allotment as well.
We have an allotment. We grow our own food. We have, we're just... But it's the best life we've ever had.
Yeah.
So it's, we don't need money.
So, Nick, you've had some other projects going on as well as Late Junction, is that right? You have some things...
Yeah, the other thing I do, it takes up a lot of time, is a project where I work with architects and musicians, and I basically invite musicians to create sonic responses to different spaces. So it's a project I've been running for about 8 years, and we just launched with the Barbican in London, where we had different musicians compose different pieces of music or sound art, I guess, for different spaces around the Barbican, and then the tracks all geo-tagged to the spot, so you use your phone to access the music. So it's kind of... Yeah, it's an interesting...
That sounds great.
...project, yeah.
Can people do that now? Can they download
Yeah, they can, yeah. It's just musicityglobal.com is the website, and then you kind of get all the instructions. And we're live in, all over London, different places. And this would be an amazing place to do a track, because it's such an incredible space. So, it's all about fusing architecture and music, really.
Great. And, Nina, what's next for Rough Trade Books? Who have you got coming up?
Oh, we've just done a proper book.
Oh, right. Do you have done one already?
Well, we have done. We did one earlier in the year with Craig, the designer, about They Live, the John Carpenter movie, and the ripple effect that it's had on society. And it's a series that he's done, which is called Epiphany Additions, which are the props in films where people have an epiphany, basically. So it's when Roddy Piper puts on the glasses and discovers that all of this advertising is just, blatant whatever. And he's got another one with The Shining where Wendy discovers the manuscript. So they're all they're all replicas of those books. But that's not the next book. The next book is about visionary outsider artist Madge Gill. And it's connected to an exhibition that's happening at the William Morris Gallery. So that's been a great collaboration, actually, the partnership with them. And they're not demanding social media hashtags all the time. So that's good. And it kind of just came very naturally through our mutual friend, Kirsty McNish. So that's the next book. So that's quite exciting. But the only way we're able to do that is because we've partnered with them. So they've kind of paid up front for the printing costs. And it was the same with They Live. We partnered with Mondo Death Waltz to do that as well. So that's the only way we can do books at the moment. But we're continuing with the pamphlet series on a quarterly basis.
Great. And then people can buy them from... What's the best place to buy them?
Best
Online?
Place to buy them for all you authors, including you, Luke, is roughtradebooks.com.
There you go. Go and buy Rough Trade Books pamphlets. Keep listening to Late Junction and complain to the BBC so it doesn't become the British Playlist Corporation. Thanks very much to Nick and Nina. Thanks very much to Lush for having us here, and to everyone at Sea Change. And thanks to you all for getting up so early for this small church service.
I thought no one would be here.
Yeah, you nearly weren't.
I know.
Yeah, so thanks very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the festival. Cheers.